I'm Simon Morris. I'm a cinematographer, and I'm currently working in Sydney. It's actually kind of a tricky question. The cinematographer is responsible for telling the story in a visual way. Um, the director concentrates on the actors and the acting and the whole big product, whereas the cinematographer's mainly focused on how to visually tell that story. So that whatever that involves, that's lighting, camera, composition, framing, everything that is in that bracket of visual storytelling. So, yeah. To get where I am now, it's been long. I'm still young. I'm still really, too young, I think, to be doing what I'm doing. I think I keep pinching myself every now and then, realizing that I'm getting to do these amazing things at my age, because usually it's reserved for people a lot older than me. But it's been a long road. Like, I did the traditional route where I kind of came through the camera department. I first of all I actually started off working in post. So I did a short amount of time in a post-production house working on some big films in Telecine. And so after that, I got a job at Lemac, the camera rental company, and was there for about 3 years. So I learnt all the gear, learnt all about cameras, I'd already kind of had a passion for cameras and camera work, and that's why after my year of post, I kind of went, this isn't for me at all, sitting in the dark room, staring at a screen the whole time. So I decided to get into camera. So I got a job at Lemac, and that was great. Learned heaps, and started camera assisting for John Bowring, who owns Lemac, and that was amazing. I was really fortunate to be working under him because he taught me so much, and he knows everything. So that was amazing. And then after about 3 years, I decided it was time to go out in the freelance world. And so I did that and went out into the traditional, started off as a loader, doing bits and pieces, data wrangling, went into focus pulling, did that for a couple of years. And just recently I've kind of gone, I feel like I'm naturally at the progression where I've just ended up shooting more than I assist. And so I feel like it's kind of time to go, I'm not assisting anymore. Assisting, really, for me, was where I learnt most of what I know. Just working under other DPs and seeing how they work and seeing how they approach lighting, and if you're really lucky, like I was, I had John Bowring. I worked under him for a long time, and he was just a fountain of knowledge. And it was an open book. So if I ever wanted to know anything, he'd even quiz me sometimes driving back from a shoot, and so he was a really great person to learn from, and I'd say that's probably where I learnt most about what I do now, from him and other DPs. Just watching them, just kind of being the quiet observer on set, I think has been really valuable for me, because I've learnt a lot of things that I totally wouldn't have learnt if I just went straight into DPing myself. I wouldn't have seen all these other tricks that other people do, and so it's been really valuable. Actually, can I say something about that? I think the whole, my path to where I am now has been quite fast. Like the old school, traditional mentality is to, you're a loader for 5 to 10 years, and then you be a focus puller for another 10 years, and then you might start to think about stepping into being a DP. That's the more older traditional way of doing things, and I have a lot of respect for that way, and I think it's really important. But I seem to have it's happened a lot quicker for me. But I've seen a lot of people who don't do that at all and just go straight into the DPing thing. And some people are amazingly talented and they can do that. It's awesome. Good on them. But I think there's a lot to be learned from doing it the traditional way, because it's not so much just about making pretty pictures and shooting on a nice camera and making stuff look great. It's also about, when you get into bigger sets and you've got a bigger crew, it's also about managing people and how to, think ahead, 3 steps ahead, and managing your lighting guys and the camera assistants, and just kind of, keeping communication clear and all that kind of stuff. Those kind of skills you learn from being on set a lot and from, working your way up the ranks. And I've seen some of the guys who just go straight into shooting don't seem to tend to those skills as much, and I think it's really important, because there's filmmaking is storytelling, but it's also running a big machine of people, And so you've got to have those skills as well. I'm not so much about cameras. I feel cameras are just a tool to do a job. So I'm more about storytelling. Like I like to just tell a story visually. I like single frames and shots that can, you know, sum up a lot of the story just in their framing, composition, all that kind of stuff. I try not to get too carried away with the technical side of it, although you do need to know it, it's really important. So I do stay on top of it, but I try not to get too caught up with it, to be honest. I try to focus more on how I can use that tool to tell the story and which tool will tell that story best. You can get a bit carried away with technology and pick the wrong tool for the job. Like, I don't know if you saw, was it Public Enemies? That gangster film with Johnny Depp in it, I think. And they shot that on like EX1s and like all these different formats. And I remember hearing that the argument was because they liked the freedom and it's so small and they could do all these crazy shots. But I remember seeing the film and thinking there wasn't really that many crazy shots in there, and there was no shots that they couldn't have gotten with a film camera. And I had a lot of friends who aren't in the film industry at all, who have no technical knowledge of that kind of stuff. And they were just like, what's wrong with the film? Why is it all grainy and it's all weird and it just looks blur? You know, people can't put their finger on exactly what the problem is, but they're like, the filming is bad. And I agree. I mean, it comes down to personal preference, but I thought like that was a bit of an example of picking the wrong tool for the job. But, you know, obviously I'm nowhere near as experienced as the DP of that, but still, it's just like, I just remember thinking that's a strange decision. And so yeah, it's an example of going the other way, you know, where, yeah, instead of kind of thinking of the camera, instead of kind of thinking of the technical stuff about the camera, they chose the form factor, I guess. I don't know, it was a weird one. I don't know why they did that, because it was a really bizarre decision. I saw an ad for Collateral that's coming up on TV next week or something. And I thought that was a really interesting film because that was an example of, Dion Beebe shot that, and I heard from an interview or something that he specifically chose that because it was the F900, I think, that they shot it on. Because of the grain structure. You know, it's got heaps of grain and it looks digital and it's kind of noisy and it's kind of what a lot of people would think looks kind of crappy. But he chose it because it suited the film, it suited the aesthetic, and it suited the whole Miami nighttime, you know, kind of raw and like buzzy kind of nature of the story, I guess. I don't know, but it was a really interesting decision because a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought it was cool because it just gave it a texture and it was something that we hadn't really seen much of done that way before. Because usually you think grain, you want to get rid of it, but he was actually trying to like use it, which is, you know, it's an artistic choice and good on him. Why not? I couldn't think of any specific images, but I'd say, to be honest, anything that Roger Deakins shoots is, in my mind, perfect. Like, he's an inspiration for me because not only do I love the films that he seems to always pick to work on, but the way that he shoots is it kind of taught me a lot about how you can use the camera to tell the story. And so I'd say he's probably my biggest inspiration. I mean, you know, I'm not going to compare to Deakins, but like, I'd say that I'm quite like that as well because I'm still young and I'm still kind of learning, to be honest. I've grown up in a very, you know, in Australia we have no budgets for much at all really. So I feel like a lot of the work that I've done has been me and a camera, maybe one light, two lights if I'm lucky. If I'm really lucky, I'll get a gaffer. I love that because it gives me a chance to play with all these toys I wouldn't usually get a chance to play with. But most of the stuff that I do, and I feel a lot of people do here, is so minimalist. Like, it's so just a couple of lights and just whatever, and it's all about like placement of people in a room and like just using the natural light and whatever you've got and just being resourceful. I think that's probably the way that I work now, and I'm just kind of getting to the point where I'm starting to get a chance to work with gaffers and stuff, and I'm learning a lot by doing that. And so yeah, then you kind of realize that you can do all these other things as well as just put them in the nice light and find a nice frame. You can then go, oh, I can put a backlight in, and then I can, you know, put a bit of neg, and I can do all these other things that make it look at that extra bit. Amazing. Lately, I just finished a campaign for Qantas that's going to be mainly based online, I think, but it's going to have cinema release and I think a little bit of a TV commercial, hopefully. And that was a big shoot all around Australia for 3 months, which was great. And before that, I did a feature documentary called Tender, which is just being released now. We had the premiere 2 weeks ago, and yeah, so it's been a pretty busy year. Well, for Qantas, I didn't. Basically, because we were travelling around all of Australia, we did a week in each state, so 8-week shoot spread out over 3 months. We had a really small lighting package, just a couple of DDOs and a Kino that we took with us everywhere, which was kind of an emergency, if I need to throw something up quickly, I've got it there. But if we had a scenario which we could pre-plan and something we could kind of structure, and it required a bit of lighting, I'd get a gaffer on. And that was amazing because basically whenever we were like, okay, we're going to do a performance thing next Tuesday, I'd organise to get a gaffer in for that. And so then we could just kind of relax and play with all the toys and make it look as good as I possibly could just for that day. And then for the bulk of the time, it's just me and a camera and a couple of lights. But to be honest, I barely got a chance to use the lights because I'm too busy running around shooting. So yeah, very minimalist. But that's the kind of style, that was the director's treatment, was very much documentary. He's like, I want it to be run and gun, I want it to be handheld, I never want the camera still, which took a little bit of adjusting for me because my previous job was the complete opposite. It was always still, it was always on the tripod, it was always locked off. So it took me a couple of days to get into this swing of going handheld again. But it, yeah, and that's just the style of the job. And that kind of goes back to my point about how each job is different. And so you choose a different tool for each job. You know what I mean? Because I would love to have shot Qantas on Alexa, but there's no way I could have done that. Like handheld for 3 months, running around Australia with an Alexa, with no assistant, no gaffer. Like, it's just not possible. So I needed something smaller, lightweight, something that was a bit quicker, zooms. So you just pick the right package for the job. Well, one thing I over the past year or two have had an amazing, I feel I've been really blessed to have the chance to work a lot with Warwick Thornton, who's a really amazing DP and director. And he really taught me a lot about taking time and making sure you have time. It's not, obviously, it's a little easier for someone like him to say, I need time, and that actually happens. But the biggest thing that really affects one of the biggest things that really affects how good something can look is time. Because if you don't have time to do the lights and make it look great, then it's just going to look crap. So time, like, just try and take your time and but to do that, you really have to get in early. Like, you've got to really be involved with the producer and the schedule and all that kind of stuff to really kind of make sure that you have the time that you need to do certain things. Because if they just go ahead and just go, all right, this is what you're doing, you're like, but I can't do it in that amount of time. It's really frustrating. So he taught me a lot about just, we did a film, I remember a short film that most other productions I would have worked on would have shot that film in 3 days. We took 7 because he's like, instead of doing 20 setups a day, let's do 10 and let's just do them properly and focus and spend the time and get the frame and just work within that frame and not just try and get 20 shots of the same thing. Just get one shot and do it right. And which is like the idealistic world of filmmaking, but to see it actually happening in front of me, I was like, oh, it is actually possible. So you just got to kind of really push for it, I guess. You've got to kind of learn when to push and when to stop, like, when you can, you try and push for that extra, 20 minutes so you can put a couple more lights in or whatever. But you've really got to kind of, which once again I think goes back to people skills. You've got to kind of really know when to go, okay, no, I need to just take a back seat on this one, because if the actor's ready to go and makeup's done and everyone's, in the zone, and you're like, no, I've got another 30 minutes because I want to do a couple more tweaks. Like, no, you've just got to kind of drop the ego and just go, no, okay, now's the time that we need to shoot. Because there's so many other things that, filmmaking is a collaborative thing. So there's so many other jobs that are not more important, not less important. They're all the same. Everyone's important. And so there's so many other factors involved with getting a shot that as much as you want to take the time and you want to make it perfect, you also have to kind of know when, okay, let's just go. If the actor's in the zone and the actor's wanting to go, then let's shoot. You know what I mean? So which kind of goes against what I was saying before, but that's what it's just about managing. It's all about wriggle, it's push and then leave it and then, I find it's great because it gives me the chance to really, because basically being a cinematographer, I find you always get these shots in your mind and you have this idea of how you want something to look. And if you don't have the right tools or as many tools as you need available to you to make that happen, it gets really frustrating. And you're like, oh, that's okay, but I really want a backlight there and I really want a big soft thing, And so it's frustrating because the image in your head isn't the image that is coming out of the camera. And, you get I get kind of annoyed about that. And so when you get a chance to work with a gaffer and a crew, I find it's just about giving you the chance to make that image that's coming out of the camera look like the one that you've got in your head. So I've we want to use frames and scrim and neg and all these things that you don't usually get a chance to do. But now that I can really make it look exactly how I want. So once again, it's just about having more tools at your disposal. So.